I'm Ann Gaviola. Welcome to the Peak on Global, where we break down what's trending in the business world and what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. Joining me now is Brett Chang from the Peak podcast. Welcome, Brett, and really nice background. I dig it.
Thanks so much, Ann. It's great to be back with you.
Let's start things off with a talk about this big surprise move by the Bank of Canada. It hiked interest rates, its key interest rate, by a full percentage point, bringing its benchmark lending rate to 2.5%. This is the biggest move higher from our central bank in nearly a quarter century. By design, it's putting the squeeze on some parts of the economy, and it, of course, has immediate financial impacts for those with variable rate mortgages. What say you, Brett?
Well, it shows you how seriously the central bank, in particular the Bank of Canada, is taking the inflation issue. We've seen now data in both Canada and the US that despite the central bank increasing interest rates, inflation continues to grow. And that's becoming a real problem for Canadian consumers. And so they're really starting to put a focus on what else can we do to bring that inflation rate down. And interest rates are really the primary tool.
Yeah, when asked about this, Tiff Macklin, the head of the Bank of Canada, said they have no choice. I mean, inflation is such a big deal right now that they have to act aggressively now and kind of leaving the door open for more moves, maybe even some more big moves in the future. I do want to highlight something that came to light in my conversations with economists this week, Brett. And they've reminded me that if you look at the past 60 years or so, every single time that our central bank has hiked rates aggressively in order to fight high inflation, it's resulted in a recession. Every single time. Does that matter?
Well, I think it really matters. By the way, and we like to call him T-Mac on the Peak Daily, Tiff Macklin. But the real problem is that they're trying to find what they're calling a safe landing. They're trying to bring down inflation, increase interest rates, soft landing, increase interest rates incrementally and create a situation where they can avoid a recession. But it really seems like that's unlikely in the longer term. But in the short term, the challenge, and I think this is confusing a lot of economists and people in the business world, is that unemployment still remains very low. In fact, we need more workers in the workplace right now to fill spots. And so the economy seems to be doing fine, yet inflation is soaring, and that's really costing Canadians. And then the challenge is that if they do, as they do increase interest rates, that's going to cause a lot of Canadians, especially with variable mortgage, more in terms of their housing costs. So there's a bunch of different forces at play, and everyone's just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I've never heard this many experts kind of say, I'm not sure, or I've never seen this before. That does seem to be kind of the theme of the pandemic. Now, I think it's super interesting that, just a few conversations ago, we said recession, maybe. Let's bring in kind of this next topic. It segues nicely. New Leger polling suggests the majority of Canadians think that we're already in a recession. Now, of course, the technical definition of recession, it's 2 consecutive quarters of contraction, so we're not there yet. But the feeling here is important, Brett. It's that a downturn or some sort of economic slowdown has begun, has started. And Brett, these things can have an element of kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Well, that's exactly right, Ann. And so I think a lot of Canadians are reading the headlines about companies making huge layoffs and cutting back on their spending, and that is influencing a lot of their own sentiment around whether we're in a recession or not. But you're absolutely right about the self-fulfilling prophecy, which is if Canadians believe that we're in a recession, they're going to start to act appropriately, meaning that they're going to pull back their own spending. They're going to spend less on a variety of different items, and that's going to consequently create an environment where a recession really is possible, where people are just spending less, companies and people are just spending less on everyday things. And as a result, it's tougher for companies to hire and grow. And that's where you start to see that contraction happen. So it could very well be a self-fulfilling prophecy here. And that's why it's an important number.
Right. And it's not just, everyday households thinking this. We've heard from a lot of CEOs, heads of major companies, both in the US and Canada, saying, I've got a bad feeling about what's to come in the next few months for the rest of this year and even into next year. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that one. Let's talk as well about another really big story. This is the fallout from the widespread Rogers outage. The big day, of course, was Friday, July 8th. It caused chaos. Emergency services knocked out for some. People were scrambling to work, to pay for things, to get money out from their ATM, to receive payments for small businesses. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, Brett, I'd like to know, were you personally impacted and the team over at the Peak?
Well, we were very, very lucky. In particular, I was very lucky. And it's really just luck of the draw here. So I happened to have my phone on TELUS, my home internet on Bell, and then I came into the office. I'm not exactly sure which provider we're using, but it was something other than Rogers. And so for me, the disruption was very minimal, except when I tried to go out for lunch. And as you mentioned, you couldn't use Interac, you couldn't take money out of an ATM. And so we were kind of stuck. We eventually figured out a way to do it where I had to go to a TD branch. As a TD customer, I could take out money. But it was truly a chaotic day and one that we definitely don't want to see repeated.
Yeah, and of course there are, safety nets being worked out and processes for the next time that this happens. But it's worth remembering this is the second major outage from Rogers in 15 months. So not too long. Chances are there may be something more like this sometime ever in the future. And I think the kind of context for all of this is if you thought it was bad this time around, remember that Canada is in the process of rolling out its 5G network. So the next generation of the internet, this is the kind of technology that's going to allow for truly smart homes, connected vehicles, and all the rest of it. And so to me, you connect the dots. And what this means is we were already reliant on this technology. And the next phase is that we're going to become even more reliant, which would mean another widespread outage. Well, it gives me a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach.
Well, yeah. So one, we're going to become more reliant on wireless technology as we kind of roll out that 5G. But I think the big consequences here and what the federal regulators are trying to figure out is how to avoid a situation like this. And there are really two primary levers that they have at their disposal. One is going to be a big problem for Rogers, as we've talked about before on this show. And Rogers has been trying to buy one of their big competitors out west, Shaw. And it's very, very unlikely, or it feels unlikely, that the federal government and regulators will ever approve that deal, because it really does show you the problems that consolidation in our telco industry have if you have another outage like this. And the second is that now the federal government is trying to figure out, is there a way that we can get the other providers, Bell and TELUS, to step in so that if one of them do go out, there's a way to connect to alternative networks to keep services online. So those are the main levers that regulators are looking at. But it's a big question about how do we avoid something like this again? And unlike other countries, we just have a highly consolidated telecom industry, which makes us vulnerable for these types of outages.
Yeah, in terms of news you can use, I would say from a consumer perspective, I know there's a lot of kind of a trend towards bundling your services, but maybe spread that risk out and don't bundle. Instead, choose different providers for different things so you're not fully stuck. Thank you so much for your time and your insight, as always, Brett.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Let's do it again next week. And you can get all your daily business news with the Peak Daily Podcast. It's available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.